You absolutely noticed. That thing he said last Tuesday that landed slightly wrong, the way he went quiet when you asked a simple question, the cancellation that came with an excuse that was technically fine but felt like something else entirely, you noticed all of it. And then you did what people do when they really like someone. You explained it away. You gave it context. You found the most generous interpretation available, and you held on to it. Because the alternative, that what you noticed was actually what it looked like, was something you were not ready to consider yet. This video is not here to tell you that you were stupid. You are not. You are doing something completely human, something that neuroscience can explain and that almost every person has done at some point with someone they really liked. But there are 5 specific things, 5 patterns that people in the early stages of attraction consistently overlook, explain away, or actively choose not to examine. Not because they are blind, because seeing clearly costs something when you already care. So let us look clearly, together. The first red flag is inconsistency between words and actions. He tells you he's really into you. He says he wants to see you more. He talks about things you should do together. And then the actual time between seeing each other stretches. Plans get rescheduled. The follow-through on what he said does not quite match the enthusiasm of when he said it. And you find yourself doing a very specific kind of mental work, justifying the gap. He's busy. He has a lot going on. He shows up when he can. People express interest differently. You are not needy. You understand. And maybe all of that is true, but here's what's also true. When someone is genuinely excited about another person, they find ways to close the distance between intention and action. Not perfectly, not without effort, but consistently enough that you don't have to spend energy convincing yourself the interest is real. The gap between what someone says and what they actually do is one of the most reliable signals available to you. Not because people are liars, but because action requires effort, and effort reveals priority. What someone does consistently, across time, under normal conditions, is what you actually are to them. You noticed the gap. You explained it. Notice that you noticed.
The second red flag is that you feel better after talking to them about your worries about them. Read that again because it is subtle and it matters enormously. At some point, you had a concern. Maybe he was distant for a few days. Maybe something felt off. Maybe you brought it up and he had a perfectly reasonable explanation and was warm about it. And by the end of the conversation, you felt reassured and things felt okay again. And then the same thing happened again, a few weeks later. Same pattern, different surface reason, same resolution. You felt better, you moved on. Here is what that cycle actually is. It is called reassurance seeking. And when it becomes a pattern, when you repeatedly need to bring something up, receive reassurance, feel okay, then eventually feel the original concern return, it usually means the reassurance is working, but the underlying thing that created the concern is not changing. Reassurance feels like resolution. It is not always resolution. Sometimes it is a temporary relief that allows both people to avoid the harder conversation about the pattern itself. If you have had a version of the same conversation more than twice, you are not solving a problem. You are managing a feeling around a problem that has not actually been addressed. The third red flag is how you feel in the silences. Not the comfortable silences of two people who know each other well, the other silences. The gap between messages that goes slightly longer than it should. The moment at the end of a date when you are not sure where you stand. The space after you said something real and vulnerable, and the response was fine, but not quite landing. Pay attention to what you do in those silences. Do you pick up your phone and check if he has responded? Do you replay the last conversation looking for clues? Do you find yourself crafting the next message in your head before the current moment has even finished? That behavior, that anxious monitoring, is your nervous system telling you that it does not feel secure in this connection. And a nervous system that does not feel secure with someone is giving you information. Not necessarily that the person is bad, but that something in how this connection operates is producing anxiety rather than ease. Healthy early attraction feels exciting and slightly nervous in a good way. It does not feel like constant low-grade monitoring of signals and silences. The fourth red flag is that you have made yourself smaller to keep things comfortable. You didn't bring up the thing that bothered you because you didn't want to seem difficult. You agreed with something you didn't actually agree with because disagreeing felt risky. You presented a slightly easier, lighter, less complicated version of yourself because you sensed that the fuller version might be too much. And here's the thing, you didn't decide to do this. It happened gradually, without announcement. The editing of yourself in response to what you perceived this person could handle or wanted or would respond well to.
That is not always a red flag about him. Sometimes it is information about your own patterns, but it is always a red flag about the dynamic. Because a dynamic in which you feel you need to be smaller, lighter, easier to be acceptable is a dynamic in which your actual self is not welcome. And a relationship in which your actual self is not welcome is not a relationship you can live inside fully. Notice where you have gotten smaller. Not to blame him, but to ask honestly whether the smallness is being asked of you or whether you simply feel it would be safer. The fifth red flag is the simplest and the most ignored. You do not feel chosen. Not unloved necessarily, not unappreciated, just not chosen with the specific clarity that makes you feel like the decision to be with you was made and is being made continuously by someone who sees you and wants you specifically. Liking someone is not the same as choosing them. Interest is not the same as commitment. Enjoyment is not the same as intention. And the specific feeling of being chosen, of being someone's clear, unambiguous, active choice is something you know when you have it and feel the absence of when you do not. You cannot explain this one away as easily as the others. You cannot contextualize it or give it generous interpretation. It is a felt sense in the body before it is a thought in the mind. And if you have been reading this and that specific feeling has been quietly present underneath everything else, you already know what it is. Now, here is the hard part. Knowing these things does not automatically tell you what to do. Red flags are not instructions, they are information. And what you do with information depends on where you are, what you want, what you are willing to ask for, and what you are willing to accept. But there is one thing that is always worth doing, regardless of what you decide. Stop explaining away what you noticed. Not because noticing means leaving, not because red flags automatically mean the person is wrong for you, but because you deserve to make your choices with clear eyes, to see what is actually happening and decide what you want to do about it from that honest place, rather than from the place of wanting things to be different from what they are. You noticed all of it, from the beginning. The most important question is not what he meant, not whether he is a good person, not whether the situation could change. The most important question is what you are going to do now that you have stopped pretending you did not notice.